Tonight, I want us to look at the idea of criticism. Now, criticism itself is not necessarily a mental health issue, but I think a lot of people will bring it into that area of thought because if you're criticized, it's going to affect the way that you feel about yourself a lot of the time. And so I want to talk tonight about how do we deal with being criticized? How do we deal with criticism? Criticism usually hurts. Maybe always. I don't know. It depends on how serious we take it. But it usually hurts to be criticized or to be rebuked, to be corrected and told that you're doing something wrong. We don't like that. It doesn't feel good. I think there are some reasons why it hurts. One is that it hurts our pride. When somebody points out that we're wrong, well, that damages our pride. It makes us feel like we're not so great because, well, we made a mistake. We did something wrong. And it exposes problems that exist, with us, that we have a problem. Maybe we have a problem with our heart, or maybe we have a problem with our understanding, or perhaps it's some other thing, but we have a problem. Or sometimes criticism is wrong. Sometimes the person criticizing us is actually wrong about their criticism. But even then, it can be kind of hurtful because it shows problems with how someone else thinks. If we care about them and we see that they don't understand things properly, and perhaps maybe it even shows they don't think about us in a nice way, then it hurts. So those are some reasons, I think. There may be others why criticism hurts, but I want us to understand that criticism also usually helps. Much like exercise hurts, but it often helps. Criticism also, just because it hurts doesn't mean it's bad. It usually helps us. Why? Well, for almost the same reasons that it hurts. Because it hurts our pride, and that's a good thing. We should not have pride. If we're upset about being criticized because it hurts our pride, that shows us, well, we have too much pride. We need to step back and realize we're not great. We need to have humility. And also it exposes the problems that we have, and that enables us to change and fix those problems. Which is a very important, very valuable thing. If we don't know about our problems, if we don't know we've made a mistake, we cannot fix it. And so criticism, even though it hurts to show what we've done wrong, it is very helpful. We can change it because of the correction. And when it exposes the problems with how someone else thinks, not how they think, but anyway, sorry about the typo. We can correct them in love. We can see, oh, well, here's the problem. What you're saying is actually wrong, and here's why. So we can correct them in love. We'll look at an example of that a bit later, but. Those are some reasons why it helps. It helps us with everybody involved, the one who's doing the correcting and the one being corrected. We can sometimes help one another with our understanding and doing what is good and right. I want to look a little bit, though, at some of the Proverbs that talk about the wisdom that comes in loving criticism. Even though it doesn't feel good, we should actually love to be criticized or rebuked, have reproof or correction. Those terms are, I think, pretty much equivalent to criticism. In Proverbs 1, verses 11 through 13, in the introduction to the book, Solomon talking to his son, which then applies to all of us too, or anyone reading this wisdom, says, if they say, these wicked people that are inviting you, if they say, come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood, let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause, let us swallow them alive like Sheol, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall have all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Obviously, I put the wrong verse reference in here, and these are not the right verses. For what I meant here, I apologize. I was not too on top of preparing this lesson tonight, but we'll skip that one and move on to chapter 10, verse 17. He who keeps instruction is in the way of life, but he who refuses correction goes astray. So if you refuse correction, what's going to happen? You're going to go astray, because as you start deviating from what is right, as you start going away from it, if you're not corrected, you're going to keep going away from it. Correction brings us back to the right way. And that is something that criticism, rebuke, reproof, correction, that is something that does for us. It helps us get back to the right way. In Proverbs 12 and verse 1, it says, whoever loves instruction loves knowledge, but he who hates correction is stupid. If you hate being corrected, you hate being criticized, you're stupid. Now, we don't like it. We don't enjoy it. I don't know anyone who enjoys being corrected. But hating being corrected is stupid. We should appreciate it. We may not feel good about it, but we should appreciate it. In Proverbs 13, in verse 18, it says, poverty and shame will come to him who disdains correction, but he who regards a rebuke will be honored. We feel like, well, if you have to be rebuked, that's really lowering you. It's pushing you down. It's oppressing you or something like that. But no, if you actually take it to heart and you make the correction, then you actually receive honor for that. Those who can correct themselves when they are rebuked, when they are criticized, that they are showing themselves to have wisdom, to have the right kind of heart, and there's honor in that. In Proverbs 15, in verse 31 and 32, these two different proverbs both deal with this idea. It says, the ear that hears the rebukes of life will abide among the wise. We need to pay attention to the rebukes if we want to be wise. In verse 32, he who disdains instruction despises his own soul, but he who heeds rebuke gets understanding. We need this rebuke. We need criticism, correction. Proverbs 17, verse 10, rebuke is more effective for a wise man than 100 blows on a fool. You can beat a fool and he's still a fool. But if you're wise and you're rebuked, you make a change, right? You don't have to be beaten in order to get the point through to you. Rebuke should be enough. Criticism should cause correction if we consider it and find that it is valid criticism. And same, rebuke. If we're rebuked in truth, then we're going to make that correction. In Proverbs 27, verse 5, it says, open rebuke is better than love carefully concealed. We need people to rebuke us, even openly. And that's better than someone who maybe loves us, but doesn't do anything about it, right? That's not real love, is it? Carefully concealed. We need that rebuke. We need that. And so true love is not going to conceal that. They're going to rebuke us. They're going to criticize us. In chapter 28 and verse 23, he who rebukes a man will find more favor afterward than he who flatters with the tongue. Yeah, the one that tells you, oh yeah, you did everything just right. You're the best at this. That feels good at the moment. But in the long run, when you realize, no, I did need to change, you're going to appreciate the one who told you needed to change. Not the one who told you, oh yeah, everything's great. You're just perfect the way you are. In the moment that feels better, but in the long run, we must really appreciate the one who will rebuke us, criticize us, bring us correction. In Proverbs 29, verse 1, he who is often rebuked and hardens his neck will suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. So if we ignore rebuke, people are trying to correct us, we keep ignoring it and hardening our neck, doubling down, keeping doing what we're doing despite being corrected, criticized for it, we're going to be destroyed. All right, so I hope that got the point across. These are certainly not the only passages that deal with this idea of the wisdom in listening to criticism, listening to correction and rebuke and reproof. But there's a lot there that really reinforces that idea. All right, but we can easily react to criticism in a negative way. It's very easy to have that reaction because we don't feel good about it. And so our natural instinct is to actually react in a negative way. Some negative ways of dealing with criticism are just to dismiss it. I don't need that negativity. I'm doing fine the way I am. You're just jealous, or some such excuse that we have. Or becoming angry with the one who's bringing the criticism. Oh, you have no love. You just are having your own problems, and you're bringing that on me. Whatever we may think about it or say about it, we just have our ways of getting around listening to the criticism. And this idea of doubling down or increasing what we're doing, we're being criticized for because of pride, right? That idea of hardening our neck after much rebuke, that comes from pride, saying, no, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm my own person. I'm going to do it my way. And, that certainly happens among Christians. I've seen it happen among preachers, actually quite a bit. When someone points out that something they're doing isn't wise, or it's not necessarily in keeping with some of the scriptures, and then they want to really stress that they have freedom to do this, and so they just go ahead and keep doing it, maybe even more, flaunting this because of pride is really what it comes from. We have to be very careful about that idea. That is not a healthy way of dealing with criticism. Just dismissing criticism is not healthy. We see this with Cain. We're not going to read the whole thing. We don't have time, but when God did not respect Cain and his offering, he was angry. Cain was angry and his countenance fell. And the Lord corrected Cain. He criticized him, right? And told him what to do to fix the problem, but he didn't. Instead, he killed his brother. In John 8, we have Jesus talking to some people who had believed in him, but not really, right? They didn't really believe who he was. And so in verse 44, he says, you are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do, and so on. And in verse 47, he says, "He who is of God hears God's words. Therefore you do not hear, because you are not of God." Then the Jews answered and said to him, "Do we not say rightly that you are a Samaritan and have a demon?" Do you see how they're just dismissing what he says by insulting him, by getting angry with him? They're not listening to his criticism. Now, it's hard to listen to someone who tells you your father is the devil, right? That sounds bad, and yet it was true. And so we need to listen and examine and really think about the evidence and what is it that they're saying? Is it true? We need to think about it before we decide, yes, that's valid criticism, or no, they really don't know what they're talking about. But there are very healthy ways of reacting to criticism as well. Here are some. We need to consider it and then either accept it or reject it based on objective examination, truth, not feelings. We're never going to feel good about it, but if we examine it, we may realize, yes, they're right. What I did was wrong, or what I'm thinking of is not right. And so we need to really examine those things. And when we see that we're wrong, we need to change. And if we realize, no, the one criticizing us is wrong, then correct them gently, not in anger, but in with a good attitude to try to help them. We see this idea in Numbers chapter 32, in verses 5 through 8. We see these 3 tribes, or 2.5 tribes, that were going to stay on the east side of the Jordan River, and they asked Moses to give them that land on that side. And in verse 6 it says, "And Moses said to the children of Gad and to the children of Reuben, Shall your brethren go to war while you sit here?" And this is what your fathers did, is what he was telling them, and he rebuked them, and they listened. They didn't interrupt. They just listened to what he had to say. And then in verse 16 through 19, it says, "Then they came near to him and said, We will build sheepfolds here for our livestock and cities for our little ones, but we ourselves will be armed, ready to go before the children of Israel until we have brought them to their place." They said, what you're thinking is not actually what we're planning. You think we're trying to stay here and not go fight with the rest of Israel. No, we're just going to leave our families here in these cities, and we're going to go and help fight until it's finished. Then we'll come back. And then Moses was quite happy. So Moses was wrong in his criticism because he didn't understand their motive, what they really meant. And a lot of people would get angry when they're corrected like that. "Oh, you don't understand me. You're just jumping to conclusions." But they gently corrected him with humility. In Joshua 22, the same group has another issue very much like this. And it says in verse 10, "And when they came to the region of the Jordan, which is in the land of Canaan, the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh built an altar there by the Jordan, a great, impressive altar. Now the children of Israel heard someone say, 'Behold, the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh have built an altar on the frontier of the land of Canaan in the region of the Jordan on the children of Israel's side.' And when the children of Israel heard of it, the whole congregation of the children of Israel gathered together at Shiloh to go to war against them." They didn't ask them first, what's this about? They got together the army. They gathered for war. And then they sent someone. In chapter 22, verse 16, the whole congregation of the Lord, "What treachery is this that you have committed against the God of Israel, to turn away this day from following the Lord, and that you have built for yourselves an altar, that you might rebel this day against the Lord?" And then they said, "No, that's not what we're doing. If that's what we're doing, then absolutely, you're right to destroy us." But this is actually not for offering any offerings on. This altar is not for use. It's a memorial to show that we are part of you, so that you guys don't cut us off in the future when our children may forget what happened. We want this altar to be proof that we also share in the altar that is the God's. So they had that attitude where they were very humble in correcting those that were criticizing them, even coming for war against them. But they didn't get angry with them. They just said, no, we understand why you don't see things. You don't see our motives properly. We get it. But here it is. Here's what we're actually doing. And then everybody was happy after that. All right. We're not going to go through all of these, but in Acts 8, Simon the sorcerer is rebuked very harshly for what he for offering money for the gift of God, and he doesn't respond badly to that. He asks for prayers. He has a good attitude about being rebuked. In 2 Peter 3, in verse 14 through 16, after Paul had really rebuked Peter in Galatians chapter 2, and I think I got some of these out of order, but that's fine. We're not going to go through all of that anyway. But he had been really rebuked harshly by Paul, and yet he still calls him in verse 15, our beloved brother Paul. He loves him, even though he had rebuked him. He knew he needed that rebuke. He had been wrong. All right. So in conclusion, criticism is good for us. It doesn't feel good, but it's good for us. And wise people love to be corrected. And so if we find ourselves hating correction, we're fools. Let's examine ourselves and see if we're really listening, if we're really appreciating being corrected. We should never just dismiss it. Even if we think it's coming from a bad motive, we should listen to it and consider it. It might help us change something that does need changing. Don't get angry with somebody who loves us enough to correct us and criticize us. And so let's just have wisdom. Criticize one another when it's needed in love and keep growing together. All right. Thank you very much.